This morning when you came in, you don't know one another. When client came into your office, what is the concept of a client when you first meet them? And what do you think their image of a psychotherapist is? And what is the concept of yourself as a person? And what do you say after you say hello? So anything that you do in response to these questions will really impact on your relationship with your client. Then why is the use of self so essential in therapy? Because you are the front and center of therapy. You are it. You're the most important instrument in therapy. And therefore, personal development is essential in connecting with your client and in also professional development. The common factor in psychotherapy, its most important factor is that you have to believe in the client that they can heal. They have the ability within themselves to solve the problem and to heal. If you don't have that belief, so when you are done therapy, what are they going to do? You've got to believe that the client has the ability and the capacity to heal, to solve problems, and you are a facilitator of that process. And how do we make that happen? And if you review the literature, you will find the most important factor is the relationship you have between you and your client. So if our relationship with our client is so important, therefore, who you are is very important. Your attributes, your characteristics, your way of approaching life, and the way what you believe in, they all come into play in your relationship, building the relationship with your clients. So what are some of the good attributes of a therapist? I am sure that you agree. You will have to develop the feeling that you can feel how the other person is feeling to a certain extent. And you have to be genuine. You cannot just, play, take a part of just playing, being a good person, understanding. And you have to be comfortable within your own skin. You have to be who you are. And unconditional positive regard from where? From who?
Carl Rogers.
Right, Carl Rogers. How do you relate to people? That's tricky, isn't it? This morning you have been relating to one another. Do you feel the warmth of the people? And you're not shied away from talking to people. So that has a lot to do with your personality, doesn't it? A lot of people say, I'm an introvert. Now, this is a good question. Can introverts be good psychotherapists? Yeah, of course, of course. And you have to be open. We were talking about how open. So we're going to be talking a little more about how much openness, self-disclosure is effective for the benefits of the client. And what are the downside of it? We're going to talk about that as well. More and more, I am convinced, if our outlook in life is positive, we exude positive energy to other people. And Paul developed this positive psychology 2.0. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. It's so important, your attitude. But it's not pretending. You genuinely feeling there is positive in the future. And people can change for the better. I think that has a lot to do with our worldview and with our concept of what is, a meaningful, fulfilling life. But that's from you. What about your client? And I think if you have the positive outlook, and I think your client will feel it. And what you do will bring about positive changes towards the goals that the client has set. And also because the way who you are, you inspire confidence. Have you had any clients come to you and say, I'm not sure if you could help me. Well, I'll give it a try. How does that make you feel? I say, oh my gosh, I don't think, there is a little bit of a barrier. But that's okay. How do we overcome that to build confidence in the client? Because it's not easy for people to come to you to share their lives, their secrets, and also something that they will not even be aware that they were having problems with. But then we also look at ourselves and to say, all right, we are not perfect. We are human beings. We're making up the same stuff. So what are the negative attributes of a bad therapist? Bad means that ineffective, or sometimes could be harmful, women. So, some approaches will say, okay, I'm here to help you. I know all the interventions. I have all the skills. I am going to diagnose what kind of problem is bothering you. And then I'm going to suggest some intervention so that it will get rid of these symptoms. Is that what you believe that psychotherapy is? We are more than just, having problem because of the symptoms. And we need to deal with more internal, and we need to deal with the cognitive part, the conscious part, and also the things that is behind, underneath the unconscious. There are a lot more stuff in the unconscious than we acting out, living every day in the conscious realm. I love that picture with the iceberg. The problem, everyday living, is just a tip of the iceberg. Underneath is huge, huge stuff that we don't even we're definitely not aware of. But when situation that triggers some of the things that was buried in the unconscious realm, and it will pop up. All of a sudden you say, I don't know why I cried. I don't know why I got angry. And I don't know, because we don't know who we are. We don't know what is inside ourselves. And so I think this course is really helpful to explore to a certain degree. We will never know everything, hidden or behind, because our behavior is what? A result of three things, I always say. Genetics. Yeah, personality characteristics. I don't think we could completely change our genetic makeup, but we could modify it consciously. And environment, how you were brought up, how you were treated in the world, and how you perceive the world. That's your environment. But the other thing too is learning. So this is why it's not hopeless. If genetically make me difficult to relate to people, I can create an environment that helps me, or I can learn, right? So our behavior is a result of genetics, environment, and learning. In my calling card, you will find my motto is, it is more important I'll read it to you. Who you are is more important than what you say and what you know. And I hope by the end of this course, I want you to create a motto for yourself if you haven't got one. Okay? It is good. Then it kind of give you a sense of what am I doing, and what do I believe in? How would I be perceived by my clients, by my supervisees, by my colleagues? Now, some people will hide behind the professional mask, right? Well, sometimes we do need that. What persuasion, what type of orientation or approach people will do that behind the professional mask? Maybe the approach that I can fix you by giving you homework, right? But you could deal with only symptoms that way, but you don't relate. And like how many people have clients coming in, 45 minutes, look at the watch, time to go, right? It's a case, because the world is very needy. People will come in for all kinds of reasons. And if you pack your day with clients, that you really don't, you don't treat them like a person in depth. And I always tell my supervisees when they go to practicum, don't take 7 clients a day. They usually take 3 in the morning? No, 4 in the morning, 3 in the afternoon. I think you're exhausted. Your clients don't get the time that they need to explore and to feel. And also for you, switching your mind from one case to another, read the past notes, right? And write some notes and then say goodbye. Is that psychotherapy? Maybe a little bit of changing symptoms. I'm not knocking it. I mean, it is helpful as long as you have a human listening to you. Of course, it heals. And as we said, we trust the client themselves could heal and how much they can distill from the conversation, from the session. But still, I think rushing isn't the way that I would like to do. And I always feel that my supervisees need time to collect themselves, to take a break. And so you have to adjust in your practice, how many. Some cases are easier and some are, deeper. And that is flexibility, isn't it? Like what we practice here. Bonnie needs a desk. We say, okay, you can have a desk, right? And so that's why, as a practitioner, you have to learn to be flexible. Be able to kind of say, okay, here is a situation. Sometimes you might have clients, it was so easy, right? Everything is black and white and easy to do. But all of a sudden, one day, she came in completely collapsed. And what do? Right? So you have to be able to sense and feel what your clients need here and now. And we talk a little bit more about that next time in the existential approach. And also, sometimes, I don't know how you practice. When you see a client's file on your desk, and you look over what was the situation, and then in your mind, at the end, how often we put at the end homework or goals to set before you come to see me, okay? So it was beautiful, everything all set up to say, now next week when you come, I want you to find some way that will motivate you to overcome this particular problem. And the client said, yeah, I will. So when they come in, you always say, look and say, well, homework last time, did you find this? I have a terrible week. It's okay. But at the end of a session, you got to give them something to work on. But if they come in, they haven't done the homework. This is why I don't give homework. Because if I give homework, they come in, they're just like everybody else, right? Demand this and this and that. Oh, I disappointed you. No, I don't give homework. I just say, what are the goals that we set together that you wanted to practice on this? So just give them a guideline, give them something concrete to do during the time and between sessions. And if they don't impose your agenda. I think that is very important. You say, okay, you got to learn how to deal with such and such. How come, what was the result? Sometimes, yes. Sometimes say, hey, I have overcome this fear, and this is so. Oh, I say, congratulations. Then you say, what are the highlights, and what are the lowlights of last week, and what are we going to work on? Then the most important thing, which I did not write in the earlier, is good listening, active listening. So often we talk too much. I fall into that too, trap. So often we wanted to tell them what I think you should do, but you are not her, you are not him. They have what? A different personality, genetics, they have been brought up in different environments, and they haven't learned, right? So our role is to listen. It's not easy to enter into the world of another person. How can you tell what the person had gone through? Here we have people who have done knee surgeries, okay? They know the pain. They know the pain that Paul is enduring right now. And I called my sister about, the swelling and all that. And she told me, she said, Lilian, unless you have gone through it, unless you've gone through and experienced it, you have no idea the kind of pain that we suffer. She had her shoulder replacement. She said, when I came home, I felt that all my bones were broken. And I tried to take pain pills, but I just could not bear that pain. You see, the same thing happened in our clients. What they have told you is a summary of what had happened to them objectively. But what did they, experience inside them? We could only get a glimpse of it. How do we get more, understand a little bit about how they experience And how do we, with our training, our studies, and our experiences, be able to understand where they are coming from and how we can test out. You see, you don't have absolute solution. This is what I was always against people have a list of intervention, do this and that. You don't really know what works within that particular person. They have a different attitude. They have to overcome a lot of things. So you have to ask them and say, okay, how would that work for you? What might be some of the difficulties that you might encounter? Maybe we would work on that way. Would you like to try to do this? So it is encouragement. It's understanding. It's feeling. We cannot completely feel how they feel, but it's try to feel how they might feel. Then with your knowledge, you say, how about try this? Different options. So they have the options to choose. What does that require of a psychotherapist? The psychotherapists need to know something, right? Need to feel and experience something. But you also need to have tools. I was saying that my brother is a builder contractor. In his tools, not just one toolbox, many boxes, many toolboxes, right? And you could just use the right tool at the right time. Sometimes when you come out of a session, you say, oh, good, I have overcome. Yeah, congratulations. But it might change later on, you know? So as a therapist, you need to be knowledgeable, you need to be flexible, and you need to accept your own limitations. We're going to talk a lot more about that. What I'm saying is that you have to listen and you have to understand yourself too. Now, why do we have to learn more about yourself? You are more effective when your therapy approach aligns with your own worldview, core values, and attributes. Does it make sense to you? If you are a mathematician and you are, like very technical and so maybe you are a little more on the CP, cognitive behavioral approach, right? And don't refuse that. That's good. We need that. But if you are someone who is philosophical and think life beyond life, you think about life and death, you think about existence, then you might take an existential approach, right? And if you were brought up in a psychodynamic kind of training, your professor, your mentor is very psychodynamic, and you feel right. And it really, this is you, and you are very interested in it, and you go deeper in it, you may take that approach. So I think we all have different orientations in our approach to psychotherapy, and that is good. But we have to be more equipped than just one approach. And this is why I always explain to my students and supervisees, don't stop learning. Even it's not, you cannot say, well, that's not me. Okay, if you want to work with people, it is okay to learn something that is not you. But I think if you know who you are and you know your own approaches, and you'll be more effective in the approach that is more in line with your ability, your beliefs, and your worldview. And also, we all have our own problems. For example, if you were brought up with a very territorial or very controlling parents, right? Sometimes that popped up. Even you learn to overcome, but sometimes it become, like either positive or you act out just like that. Or if you were insecure when you have very insecure attachment, during your early childhood, and it might pop up in your therapy. So the more you know about yourself, and you resolve the problem that you have so that you overcome. It no longer will be, with the unconscious, you will be sometimes. We'll have to accept that. And be with the self-knowledge, then it will prevent you from making mistakes. And also will be making good decisions to lead to an effective therapy. Know your true self. Complicated, huh? And that is Paul's invention here. Whatever we do, it is dictated by what we think is meaningful. We always wanted to feel that we are doing things meaningful, and our lives had to be fulfilled and be happy. And not just happy faces, but it is say, okay, I do this because I want to do this, and it is meaningful. I was mentioning about our meetup, because to us, that was meaningful. We are giving a little bit back to the society. So you have to explore, what make my life meaningful? And also your true self. And it is your social world, psychological world, biological, physical world, and the cultural world. See, we are all made of the same stuff. We are what? Psycho? Let's see, a bio, psycho, social, and spiritual beings, right? It doesn't matter what culture you come from. It doesn't matter, how old you are. And it doesn't matter what, your psychological orientation, because we are made bio, psycho, social, and spiritual. And all these 4 areas we need to learn, and the needs need to be met. Self-awareness training is an essential part of personal development. And how do we do that? We do it through self-reflection and self-analysis. To be a psychiatrist, I was told they need 5 years of self-analysis. Do we? Anybody had 5 years of self-analysis? No. But we need to examine ourselves. And some people, like with this 30 hours requirement for the registration of registered psychotherapists, and they said you could use your personal analysis and your psychotherapy as, presented to them without the course. And it is true. So many people had, make themselves available for personal therapy or in groups. And those are very important because you learn experientially how you would do it. And of course, we always use play. So the first thing is what I wanted to know, self-acceptance. We need to accept ourselves. A lot of problems occur when people do not want to be themselves, they want to be somebody else. So they put on a facade, they put on a mask, they act, they talk like somebody else because they are afraid to dig into their own self, and they are afraid to confront some of the negative things that happen in their life. And we all have secrets that we wanted to forget. We all have problems that we experience in our lives that we don't want to revisit. And what would happen to that? They all suppress into the unconscious. When there is a trigger, for example, if you look at the sunset, all of a sudden you feel so sad. You stop working. You stop enjoying your life. Why? You couldn't understand that. But if somebody helped you to, well, what happened? You know, what was it? The sunset that triggered the memory of my dad. The trigger, I see my dad was doing such and such, and you feel sad, right? So there are a lot of little triggers that brings back the memory. And you don't understand why you all of a sudden the tears come out. So your clients will have those incidents. So this is why we need to learn to listen and to see and to hear what they have to do. Now, if you don't feel comfortable within your own skin, your client will feel the same. You know, they're not comfortable with you. So often, there are things in your environment you cannot accept. And that also gives you a barrier. If the client brought similar situation, and you cannot deal with yourself, so you would having difficulties to work with that client on that particular issue. So this is why we need to learn about ourselves. To a certain extent, we could never do everything, but as a service. And this is how you learn, all right, this is the thing, right? Francis or Cece, what did they say? You have something you cannot change. You have to accept the things that you can change. What was that? God,
grant me the serenity to accept things I can.
That's right. There are things that you can change, and there are things that you cannot change. Well, we need the difference, yes. And the things that we can change, we make our effort to change. But the things that we cannot change, we have to accept. I wanted 2 things from God, and God said no. 1, I want 3 inches taller. And 1, I want 36 hours a day so that I can finish my work. We don't know what we're asking for, right? And somebody said, if you're 3 inches taller, you'll be taller than Paul. So there are always reasons. So we have to accept the things that we cannot change. But we will change the things that we can. But we need to know the difference. Self-knowledge. That's a very philosophical question, isn't it? Self-identity. This morning we talked about who we are. I was interested in the beginning. They said, well, what do you want me to tell about myself? I said, just tell yourself, because I wanted to know how much you want to review yourself without the guidelines. You remember every time when you go to a party or something, or a class, they will say, okay, tell your name, what you do, what you tell your kids, your family, and so you follow the guideline. But I want you to say, okay, what do I value most, right? And so that's why, if all your profession, your your things that you're proud of will strip away from you, including health, including family. Well, just think about the refugees that we have. Everything was stripped away. I remember in 1979, we just had a sabbatical at UCLA, and we came back from Los Angeles, and that was the first wave of Vietnamese refugees. And the families who sponsor these refugees knew there is a couple, opened their home for Bible study and support for students. We had people line up outside our house to come in and to help them. You know, it was heartbroken to see young people. And during they called the first wave of boat people, and a young lady was raped, and kids have witnessed murder, pirates on the sea, and rich people had abandoned their home and their business, and they came, nothing. And that's the time to know who you are, what are your goals, how do you live this life that is still there. And they came into our house and they were playing toys in the basement. And my little kids, at that time, Austin was 8 and Wesley was 3. Mommy, they were playing with my toys and they're breaking the toys. I said, you know what? These children have no toys at home. The ones that you don't want them to play with, would you put it aside? And the rest of them, they can play. Okay, Mommy. So they went out. And guess what? Now we have people who are physiotherapists, accountant, pharmacists. You know, it's amazing. Little things that you do to help people and how they flourish and contribute to the society. This is why, as a therapist, your reward would be to see people flourishing and people being functional again. I remember a few years ago, my husband and I were invited to speak in Tokyo. And at the end, well, we had a session together and kind of a banquet. And they said, would you say something? And I said, yes. I told them, I said, you know what? Why you want to be a psychologist and psychotherapist? If you want money, go to business. Because as a psychotherapist, you give so much of yourself. And sometimes you don't get paid, right? So if you really want money, you could leave here now. Nobody did, so it was a good thing. So the same thing with you, right? Why do you want, and Barney worked for 29 years helping students, right? Counseling, right? And you are, you know, started a practice. It's not easy life that you will have, but it's meaningful. It is very valuable to contribute to the society, but also make you feel fulfilled. And this is why it's so important to learn a little bit about yourself, and also, are there any dark sides that we need to improve? And you know, don't be a perfectionist. You'll never be perfect. But we will be revealed time and again and say, I didn't know I got that. Biases. You know, discrimination. We can't get rid of discrimination. We can never be completely unbiased. I have my biases. And if that is going to prevent me from taking on clients that I have bias against, what am I going to do? So in this course, we're going to have dialogues about that. And okay, from the screen we have personal aspirations and calling. That's important. If you're called to do something, then you will persevere, right? If you're not called, then you might just give up easily. I just remember a graduate student asked me to recommend him to do a Ph.D. in counseling psychology. And I said to him, I said, you know what? Why would you want to go into counseling psychology? Well, because I'm trained in counseling and I graduated from it. And I said, you like people? And because I know him, for 7 years at the university, he only made one friend. And the reason he and a friend got together is kind of, like teasing each other, living on sarcasm. Now, if you were the professor, would you recommend this person to go into a Ph.D. program in counseling psychology? Because that is an extreme example of who you are is more important than what you know and what you say. Because I know how much sacrifice, how much of your self-giving to your clients. And he may eventually, learn, but it's going to be a long road to learn. I've never done that before. And I just thought, and I said, you are so good with numbers, with skills, why don't you find something else? And guess what? He's very successful in the computer world. And that could still be counseling, couldn't it? Right? In the computer, you could still do computer counseling. You could still do Skype, right? But first, you got to learn people are just part of your environment, right? It's your world. And you learn more about yourself, then you could understand others, and you could be creative. I am not creative at all. My brother Dan, he painted all this with emotion and all that. I said, I can't create anything even if my life depends on it. But I'm good in photography. And that makes me feel relaxed when I take pictures and I look at it and I edit it and I crop it and I enjoy that. So all of us has some kind of ability that give us a time to rest and to enjoy. And that is important. What's another one? Music, right? You're either listening to music or you play the piano or you sing, right? Music is another way of enhancing your life because it's very stressful to be working with people. So you need a time to really feel what make me relax, what make me happy, and what are our creativity. Creativity is extremely important because you are seeing clients of all types, all cultures, of all personalities, from different environments. If you're not creative, you only have a sheet, number 1, number 2, number 3. It's not going to cut it. You have to say, okay, I listen. This is it. Now I have experienced this. Maybe this will work. Let's create it and see it collaboratively to say to the client. Like what I'm doing with you, say, okay, what is your strength? How do you use your strength to enhance your practice? And that is very important. So this is why we need to know our strengths, our weaknesses, and also deal with our unresolved issues, the baggages from the past. Now, of course, you cannot deal with that yourself. You could get a therapist yourself. You could have group therapy, and you really have to face it. Then you realize how hard it is for your clients to face the unhappy and unproductive past. And also, we need to grow. And the last one, I was saying that we are bio, psycho, social, spiritual person in 4 different aspects. And this is very important for us to realize. Who said, know thyself? Huh?
Thinking biblical sense,
Yes, yes, and philosophical too, right? So we need to have an inventory of personal traits, biases, feelings about clients, and their own career as a psychotherapist. We need to explore that and to develop a self-knowledge about some of the psychotherapists have gone through trauma and overcome. And then what about life crises? Like some of you have expressed, you know, what happened? Something happened, I have to take over another family. I have to be, you know, parents to my to my grandchildren. You know, a lot of life crises that we have no control over. And so we need to talk about this so that it would not be traumatized us and prevent us to be effective psychotherapists. And what are our defensive mechanisms? We're going to talk about that tomorrow, about transference and countertransference. And how do we overcome? All right, back to what I say. Who you are is more important than what you know. Why? Because the personal personal qualities of the therapist may be more important than your competence. And the medical model discount a person. But you know, we still need to be professional. At some point, we need to take charge, and that's important. And then we believe who you are is more important than what you know. There are so many different approaches. I'm sure among you, you have learned and you have practiced from different perspectives. Psychoanalytic, cognitive behavioral, humanistic psychology, and existential and cross-cultural psychology. And we need to know at least a little bit about each, right? But you will practice one that you feel most comfortable in. That's what we said earlier. Is that true? The therapist is the therapy. That put a very, very strong onus on the therapist, doesn't it? The true self of the therapist is the most important instrument. The therapist's personality attributes affect what he or she does and how they relate to the client. Does it make sense? But also, it's pretty heavy duty, isn't it? Oops, wrong way. Agree? Each therapist has 3 choices in an hour of therapy. You could be a neutral professional self hiding behind a white coat, or pretend to be listening and caring, false self, or be a true self. You know, I was watching some of the therapy sessions when I was supervising. Sometimes you see the therapist wasn't even paying attention. The client pouring her hearts out, and the therapist look at the watch, look at the walls. What does that tell you? She's bored, or she's not interested. And would that be effective therapy? It's pretty sad, isn't it? So the genuineness of the therapy as a human being, having the ability to connect with another human, and it is a cornerstone of effective therapy. Okay, it's 11:30. All right, I'm going to finish this here. The founders of any theory of therapy, Freud, Jung, Viktor Frankl, They develop their approaches based on their own troubling experiences. So, as a psychotherapist, when negative things happen to you, those incidents, instead of destroying you, will become a bridge for learning. And after all that experiences that you have, you understand people who share your experiences. And you'll be more effective to help others, like Freud, Jung, and Frankl. Well, Viktor Frankl, you're going to hear a lot more about him in our humanistics and existential and meaning psychology. So each theory reflects the founder's own needs, issues, personal struggles, and their pathway to healing. And we may be attracted to a particular theoretical orientation because of our own personality and our own experience. All right. You see, we were talking about as we were interacting with our client, our personal characteristic is very important, and it makes an impact on our clients and also building our relationship. Okay, we will talk about managing the inner tension. We will always, there are things that are happening that really kind of get us pretty uptight and really tense, but we have to learn how to manage it between, like the real self and the professional self. And spontaneous self-disclosure must be used for therapeutic change in the client. I had a student coming back to me and said on site the supervisor had never supervised her. She did not say anything because she wanted the supervisor to sign off, right? Because she's on off-campus office agency. But she finally had to tell me because she said, I did not get any supervision. Because every time during supervision time, the supervisor used her as a counselor because she's got so much stuff. She was struggling with divorce and depression, and she kept on talking to my student. And she said, I didn't get any supervision. And I didn't want to tell the administration because she might get into trouble. And that is hard. Disclosure for your own needs. So finally I intervened and she was able to move to another supervisor. So this is a very sensitive area and we must be able to deal with our own issues. We need to have therapy or group therapy, and we need to deal with those. Total honesty. I think we're going to stop here at 11:30, and we're going to, I think enough. Because this is going to be very, very sensitive. How much should we practice honesty? Do we have the right to be honest? Do we have the right not to be honest? What might be the outcome? What might, happen? And what are the dangers and what are the helpful situations? So we're going to do a little bit of that. Thank you. Let me see, I need to close this. Or you got to sharpen yourself as a good instrument. And there are so many areas that we talk about, that your attributes, your characteristics are to facilitate this process of change. Change is difficult. From your own experience, it was so hard. Habits formed. It's hard to change. People with addiction, with poor self-concept, easily anxious, fearful. It's hard to change. the first step is they are willing to expose themselves. They are willing to come to you, trusting that you would understand their circumstances, trusting that you will be able to help them to understand where they are coming from. Being such an instrument, we really need to be honest with ourselves so that we could be efficient, and but we would never be perfect. Remember that. Integration of personal self with the professional knowledge. And this is important. I know there are therapies. We just talk about feelings, we talk about emotion, talk about my own experience. Good, that's only part of it. You've got to have professional knowledge. You've got to be trained. You've got to be supervised. You've got to gain experience so that you know under what condition and under who you have and whether you are ready for that type. There's a matching game, isn't it? Sometimes something came to you, you just felt completely helpless. You said, I don't know where to go with this. You talk to yourself. This is one of the powerful tools that I use. What do you say to yourself? Have you ever asked yourself? Have you ever asked your client? In this situation, what did you say to yourself? That's very revealing. I don't want to talk to anybody else. I don't want to talk to, share with anybody else. But what did I say to myself? And that's a true self, isn't it? And so there has to be, professional knowledge as well as knowledge of yourself, because there would be a good fit between what the client needs and what you can offer in terms of intervention. And sometimes we need self-disclosure. That's a big deal, isn't it? It's so easy to talk about your own story, right? At lunchtime, you tell people about your story. You say, yeah, I had the same experience what you just shared, right? It was so good. Because it heals, doesn't it? By sharing, and it helps other people to support each other and say, I'm not alone in this. And I'm not weird. This is good. How did you deal with that? This is how I deal with it. Well, I'm only partially there, And it's kind of healing process starts. So to be effective, we must accept if we don't, we cannot help our clients. Okay, what are the empirical evidence regarding effective and ineffective use of self in psychotherapy? This is so important. How do we train ourselves so that we could use ourselves as an effective tool? And in what way we might be ineffective. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Okay. Agree? Relationship is a very powerful tool to share with your client. Without that trusting relationship, there will be just passing of knowledge from head to head. If you have a good relationship and the knowledge becomes three-dimensional because you're going to deal with my cognitive, my understanding of my problem, and my feelings about it, and then I set goals how to find some way in my behavior to change the things that I want to change. So it is deeper if you have a relationship. I just received a call yesterday, and someone said, I want to make an appointment with your husband. Could we have an appointment with him tomorrow? I said, I do, my husband cannot come to the phone right now. Could you tell me what that it's about and whom are we talking about? Well, it's me and my son. We've got problems. I just wanted to come and talk with him. I said, well, unfortunately, he's not available this week. Then we could book you in the middle of May. And afterwards, and I think about it, they want quick fix, don't they? Something is broken. You know, my cell phone doesn't work. I'll go and get a battery, right? And then something else, it's a quick fix. Most of the problem that we have in life is require more than a quick fix. And therefore, you have to recognize that. All right. I guess it's pretty obvious that if your characteristics is negative, like what I mentioned, the person did not like people, but he wanted to do a Ph.D. in counseling psychology, obviously, you know, it's going to be hard to train so that you can relate to people and to form alliance. But you could pretend. But how far can you go when you pretend? When something happened in your life, and you're no longer able to pretend, so you're not only not helping, but you could be harmful to your client. You might say something that you didn't intend, and you might give a wrong direction, and you might prescribe the wrong intervention. It could be, you know, very disastrous. But if you are centered, and you know you go through, well, we are not saints. Are you a saint, Carol? No, we are not saints. So we do have ups and downs, but we have to be aware of when we are most effective, when we can, you know, like handle it. Of course, we do have an element of pretense sometimes, right? I mean, we have to be realistic who we are. We are not angels. We are not gods. So this is why the more we realize our own characteristics, and the less we could, you know, pass on negative vibes and do harm to our clients. Because whatever we say, whatever we do, impact other people's life, either positively or negatively. When two human beings face to face, it doesn't matter whether you say anything, just a look, you already. Sometimes when you look at somebody's eyes, the angry eyes, you want to walk away, right? And relationship builds, most people say, well, it's what you say. To me, nonverbal impact is much, much stronger, much influential than verbal impact. When you walk into the store, the salesman says, what do you want? That's a verbal impact. Well, I wouldn't want you to tell me. But somebody who didn't say anything, just smile, follow you around, and then look at you, then make some suggestions. Nonverbal influence, isn't it? I like this one. Therapists who were rigid, self-focused, critical, and detached were perceived as less understanding. Agree? Therapists who were tired, defensive, blaming, or not confident in their own competence were less likely to form good connection. Have you had anybody who exhibits that kind of characteristics? I'm sure we do, don't we? So if you want clients to come back to you, client to get something from you, and you've got to be aware of this. Defensiveness. We all have our defenses, don't we? We all have our weak points. Somehow when you talk about, you know, like, you don't want people to know your age. That's very defensive, right? And you have reason for that because we have age discriminations in society. But you have to realize this. And you say, well, is that important to disclose? Or is that not important So it depends on situations. So you have to be very wise. I sometimes wonder, who would want to be a psychotherapist if we require so much of ourselves? So you are very special people because you are willing to go out there to help people at your own discomfort sometimes. And that is commendable. Okay, sometimes we were too psychologically analyzing people. And too much of that is not always helpful. Paul's going to talk a little bit about that. And so tomorrow we're going to dedicate a whole hour on transference and countertransference and how to manage it. Today we cover so many things in one day. Negative impact on misuse of self. And we've got to be aware of that. And unwillingness to be flexible in treatment plan. Flexibility. If you have a rigid personality, everything had to be just like this. You know, how many people have OCDs, right? True, everything had to be just right. So it's very hard to be, to be flexible. But then you have to be flexible where the needs are. Like today, if I want everything theater style, okay, in roles, in, straight, everything had to be right. So when Bonnie needs a desk, well, Bonnie, too bad, right? Yes, she's got a desk, right? So this is why it's so important when your client comes in and you know what they need, even though it's different from what you normally do. And you will allow them to do it. A client said, I have this phobia in a closed space. I can't, your office kind of give me the jitters. What would you do? Hey, nice day. I got a beautiful backyard. Let's walk and talk. Right? That's how you build relationship. And they said, aha, you understand my need. Even in small gestures. And it makes a big impact. Sometimes they say, silence is golden. I asked you a question. I allowed you time to think through, so I'll keep quiet. I think sometimes psychotherapists, and other professionals like teachers, we couldn't stop talking, right? Because that's our profession, we're talking therapy, right? So we got to talk, we got to show them how much we know. But sometimes silence is golden, you think. But then when you do it inappropriately, how would the client feel? The client feel you don't care? The client feel that you are detached from them? You never know what the other person is thinking, right? So therefore, be very cautious and say, if you use your silence and as, as something to draw out from the client, you have to do it appropriately. And some people like confrontation. Now, confrontation sometimes is necessary. Sometimes clients require you to confront them, and so they will have to move. But if you focus, keep on teaching them, you see what you're doing? I can see you're resisting, da-da-da. And then sure, you give them knowledge to realization of what they were doing. That's good. But if it's too much of that, they're not going to come back. This person is hurting me. I already got enough, in my environment, enough in my home, enough from colleagues. I don't need your therapist to tell me that. So sometimes it's really, so how delicate we walk with our client, isn't it? Tippy-toe most of the time, right? With our ears open, eyes open, and we just had to give whatever we understand and show them, hey, here I am I'm very vulnerable, here I am, I offer you. And I'm trained. I'm not just doing it out of my, fantasy in my head. I know the literature. This is why I give you articles to read, right? And inappropriate disclosure of own emotion and conflict. It's very powerful. Let's just talk a little bit about this one. Have you ever cried? Have you ever cried with a client? Give me a show of hands. Should you have tears?
No, that's what happens. Yeah. It's just all of a sudden like tears.
It just happened naturally. Just the tears going down your eyes. How did you handle that? Do you apologize? Do you share? Let's hear louder so I can hear.
I don't think I've really made, there are tears, and I'm trying to think. I think the odd time I've said, sorry, if your story has moved me so much, or something like that,
You say sorry, and because you moved me so much, and my tears,
Because some people, I think it's, they're conflicted about your show of emotion.
yes, yes. What kind of conflict would that be? The client will be conflicted because the therapist cried.
Well, I don't know, I'm just surmising.
What do you think?
Sympathy.
Sympathy, that is positive or negative?
It can be the client's there to get help, not to get sympathy.
Aha. Good. They said, I'm here to, for you to help me, I don't need sympathy. Okay, fair enough. Any other reason? How would you react? All of a sudden, you started to have tears in your eyes.
How would I react if my therapist did it?
No, for yourself, yeah. How do you feel when you all of a sudden you started to cry?
I feel touched.
Huh?
I feel touched.
You feel touched. Okay.
I can, it's almost like the pain is so great.
Yes. So the pain of your client touched your heart, and you get emotional, and then you cry. Okay? And it could be positive, it could be negative. We'll talk
If
about
the connection between you and the client is established where there's that bond, then I think the emotion is more appropriate than it's just something you haven't got that connection.
it has to have a good connection.
So I think of one client who has been with me for quite a long time, and at times she's brought me to tears with the abuse that she suffered as a child from her father.
So you could only use your tears when there is a bond between you and your client. Fair?
Yeah.
One of my graduate students could not stop crying. She had a client. When the client related the client's experiences, she started to cry. And I knew it. I could see from my monitor in my supervision, she couldn't help it. So I walked over and I said, I knocked at the door. I said, may I come in? Would you like me there? And so she said, well, I'll handle it. Good. Anyways, afterwards, she said, I don't know what to do with this. I easily cry. When people share anything with me, all of a sudden I started to cry. I said, okay, that will be the goal of the supervision training. Well, we have to accept the fact that we have that kind of, soft-heartedness, right? It's not a bad thing. But sometimes when you feel so embarrassed, when you feel you are useless, you're not helping your client, you're weak, you're a weakling. You always think that when tears are weak. Tears are not weak. You have to use it appropriately. But should we control that emotion? We have to be spontaneous. Didn't we say we have to be true to ourselves? Yes, Monty.
True, but I think you also have to know your clients too. And sometimes it's not appropriate
Yes.
because they need your strength.
The clients need your strength. The research shows that about 75% of psychotherapists, had cried with a client. And I think the research showed that more females prone to use tears and cried with empathy for the client than male. And also the people in different orientations may use that more freely than others. Somehow the CBT group very seldom use tears. And this like humanistic, psychodynamic, they are a little freer to do it. So I often, very interested in how often do our psychotherapists use tears, and how do we use it appropriately? Do we pretend to be an actor? And also that too, if you are good in acting, you take a role of an actor, you might use it more often, right? I
wouldn't say I use it. Like, it's not a tool of mine. I don't see it as a tool.
It is not a tool.
Yeah.
It is coming from your heart.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Now, I have supervised many students and I have done my work. And I'll tell you, I only cried once. Because I guess, I don't know, it's my characteristic, I guess. I'm kind of a happy person, maybe. and I don't know what it is in me, but I don't cry. I understand, I empathize, and I know what they are. And they understand that I do understand and I do care. Now, whatever tools that you use, you have to let them know that you understand, you have listened to their stories, but you do care. And not only caring, you do have means to help them get out from the bottom and move upward.
Isn't there a danger as a therapist that if we show emotion and feel that pain to that extent that we're crying, are we taking their own pain onto ourselves and protect ourselves from their pain type of a thing?
You could do that, wouldn't it?
It's like a safeguard.
Yes. You see, we have a lot of defensive mechanism within us. Mm-hmm. And we also, with the split moment, we have to come across, we have to somehow search, what should we be doing? Have you ever thought sometimes with a question there, and your mind goes a mile a minute, and you say, should I do this? Should I do that? What might be most appropriate? That means that you really need to know your client in order to choose the option that you have in your head, right? When you choose the right option and you see smile, you see restfulness, and you see peace. Mm-hmm. But if you choose the wrong one, sometimes you get hostile reaction, more anxious. But maybe that is the process a person needs to go through. You never know. So this is why you need to build self-confidence coming from competence. We always say, our ethical code, you never practice out of your area of competence. So then you say, all right, I know how to do it. I make mistakes, but how do I correct that mistake? I show the client, I make mistakes too, but I corrected myself, and that is important. This 12-year-old girl, she was my client. The parents didn't know what to do with her because she's so moody, she's aggressive, and she's depressed, and so they didn't know what to do with her. So she came to me, and I did play therapy, talk therapy, and we got along really well. And she was improving her mood swings is less, and she was able to function in school, and she was relating better with her siblings and a little, better with parents. So one session I had with the parents, this is my practice. I felt if I have children client, the young client, they could be doing so well in my office. When they go back to their own environment, where, the family is and where, all the things that are happening, the improvement rate would be very low. So I always, when I accepted a client who is under maybe 15, I would elicit the help from the parents. I said, once in a while, I will need to talk with you, and you have to give me feedback so that I know where we are going. So the parents came, and we had a good session. I understood what was going on in the home and how, the family dynamics and where the conflicts are, and, the regular stuff. And we were doing very well, and all of a sudden the phone rang. It was the brother of my client. And he discovered that she had taken overdose. And she wanted to end her life. And he panicked. The first thing I said is, call the father, call 911, and told the brother, stay where he is, the ambulance coming, and then the parents were going home. So they did, they took her to the hospital, and then, washed the stomach and everything else. And so after a couple of months, and they said, could we resume? Because in the hospital they have, therapy. Could we resume therapy with you? I say, sure. So she came in with the parents. The brothers, did the brother come? No, the brother didn't come. She and the parents came. She was just stone-faced, rigid, didn't do anything, wouldn't say anything. So I dismissed the parents outside in the waiting room, and I sat with her. She was no longer the same client that I had. She was so uptight, and she was holding onto the chair that you were sitting in, a comfy chair, and then she was shaking. At that time, the normal greeting, talking, asking questions, and there was no response whatsoever, just shaking. And I moved over. I don't know whether you touch your client at all. Only do it appropriately. Because sometimes a touch could be very powerful. And if it's inappropriate, sometimes it could be abuse, right? So especially gender. So be very careful with touch. I moved my chair a little closer to her chair. You know where my chair is, eh? So moved closer to the chair. And I sat there with her. I took a deep breath. I looked at her. Then she made contact with me because I was quiet. You see, silence is so important, isn't it? I wasn't going to bombard her with questions. And I just sat there with her. And then she was going out. Then I was pleased, but I saw teardrops coming from her eyes. Oh my gosh. My feelings was, there she is. There she is in pain. No words could express that kind of pain. Sometimes we think we are verbal human beings. We wanted to talk. But we have forgotten the deepest healing, deepest expression is quietness, reflective. So when I saw tears coming from her eyes, I knew I was connecting with her. Because going to the hospital, I'm sure mom and dad was concerned and she felt guilty and so much going on and, pump the stomach. I mean, there's a lot of suffering. So finally, she was able to cry within herself. I don't know, I did not measure my strength or distance or anything. I just naturally feeling I want to touch her. So I just kind of, may I touch you? And I touched her hand. Boy, she started crying, and guess who else crying too? Oh, that was the very first time I thought, Lilian. Oh, I started to cry, and my pressure got out of my mind. I thought, phew. And her pressure started to deep breathe and oxygen go into her brain. You should see the color in her face, and her hands started to warm up into my hand. I thought, I'd tell you, that should be a picture of empathy, picture of togetherness, and oh boy, was that healing. Oh. So I started laughing. I said, you had a tough few weeks, didn't you? There's bursts of blood. Now, I'm tempted. Well, I guess because I've been teaching so long, I had to measure what I need to do. Should I go over and give her a hug, or should I distance myself and let her, do her own thing? It's hard. Sometimes when you want to make decisions, it's not so easy, isn't it? We've got to calculate for the benefit of the client. Is she ready? What is the purpose if I want to hug? That means that you just, I love you, and I'm sorry what happened to you. It's not therapeutic, is it? I want her to leave my office walking tall. Be collected. Know what she's doing. So as a therapist, every step of the way, you set goals. Mini goals, step by step, until the client can feel that this is what I'm committed to do, what the client is able to do. So I started talking, normally like what we used to have a session. I gave her permission. I said, what had happened must have caused you a lot of pain. And it must have caused you a lot of pain before you took those extra pills. If you're not ready to talk about that, it's fine with me. I'm glad you are here. I am glad your brother made that call. And you see, think positively. Build a bridge so that you have a path to move forward. And say, but I didn't really mean that. I said, I'm sure you didn't mean it, but something triggered in it. Oh, yes. And it started to open up a little bit at a time, that door. You know what? As a psychotherapist, how hard is it to share your life, right? Like this morning, even with your colleagues, it's hard. Can you imagine as a client who the door was shut for so long and closed so tight, and you have to watch where that crack open and see the light? You shine the light. You are the light. You shine that light in, and the door started to open, and they are relaxed with you. And that was very rewarding for me. But I never forgot. I did cry.
Did you apologize for crying, or did you apologize for crying?
No. Because it was my tear, it's my crying that got her to feel that I am with her. Because she wanted to cry, but she just feel that she cannot. The society would not allow her to cry. You're weak. People think that crying is weakness. and also what she had caused the family so much trouble. So she apologized, but she didn't have to. It was not her fault. It was the only means that she knew to end her pain. Of course, you have clients that will, think of suicide to punish other people. There are people like that. But in her case, that was the only way she wanted to end her pain. As a therapist, you could say, I understand you are in pain, but there are solutions. You are precious. That's so important, that she feels loved, she feels valued, and there are ways out. You see, when you have no way out, that is hopeless. So most important thing you could give your clients is hope. And you are there to facilitate so that she can hope to do the best to fulfill her mission in life. And that is very important. Are there any questions? Okay, now we move on to the next topic. Therapist behaviors rupture alliance. In other words, you have built a relationship. All of a sudden, some of your behavior cause it to break. So if you have broken that relationship that you have built, you lose your client. And what are your responsibilities? Sometimes it is not what you do that caused the break. It's how the client interprets your behavior that caused the breakage. I'll give you one example. Paul has a client. He's a pretty high-strung professional person. And he'd been with Paul for, a good chunk of time, and they were improving. The therapy went well. And one day, there was a big traffic jam on the highway. So he called. He said, I cannot make it on time, but I am on the road, and the traffic was really heavy. I might be an hour late, who knows? So his appointment is at 7 o'clock. So he got stuck on the highway until 8:30. He said, I left work at 5 o'clock, and now it's 7 o'clock. I got here at 8:30. Well, we thought that he's coming for 7 o'clock. By 8 o'clock, Paul and I could go for dinner. But it was so late, and, well, obviously he hadn't eaten. So I said, why don't we go and get some. That was blackout. I remember that was blackout. And the only place I could get food is outside North York on Highway 7. I drove out to Highway 7 and got some Chinese dishes, So I brought it back, and we said to the client, well, we haven't eaten and you haven't eaten, it's so late, let's have dinner. So we did. After that, so they had their session, and he went home. Then he wrote to Paul. He said, you have violated client and therapist relationship. Because we ate together. That is not professional. What do you think of that? You see, you never predict how your clients interpret your action. It was out of the goodness of your heart you provide food. And here he talked about you have violated the client and therapist relationship. You see, so the relationship ruptured, not because of your fault, and because of the interpretation of the client. So that is something that you have to be careful about who you have as a client, what kind of job they have, what kind of personality, what kind of past behavior they have. You still want to be a psychotherapist?
How did you guys handle that? How did you guys handle the,
Well, they did some on email thing, and then later on they terminated because that rupture was a little too wide. And well, Paul obviously being a human got pretty upset.
Yeah.
In other words, you don't trust me. You use all these rules to escape because he has had many, many psychiatrists, psychotherapists, psychologists, right? And I could see why they go from place to place. And here's one that he had learned a lot. And he just praised, like all the things that he had learned and he had improved, and we saw in his behavior, yeah, he had improved.
So I'll have to get the food and tell him to eat in his car.
when your car come back?
Maybe go full circle. Yeah, no. So you have to remember, you cannot be expected to help all clients. You got to accept the fact that sometimes you win some and you lose some. As long as when you lose some, it's not your fault. Maybe sometimes it's our fault. I mean, we cannot prevent that. We're only human. Okay, 3 main themes of therapeutic alliance. Forming early. Why? Because in some cases, insurance only pays 6 sessions. How much can you do in 6 sessions? They're cutting down from 12 sessions to 10, now to 6. I mean, clients cannot pay. But that is neither here nor there, but I'm just saying reality. So how do you make connections? This is something that we want to talk about in our group discussion. What did you do to help build connections? The earlier, the better. And I find that play therapy, it's so good. Even playing ping pong is very good. And also you convey presence. Like you'll hear a lot about that from Paul's lecture, is here and now. Clients come all the way to sit here for 50 minutes or 60 minutes. It is here and now. I understand. I need to listen. Whatever it takes, that is where you start to build a relationship. And earlier we might say, after saying hello, what do you do? What would be the worst thing you can do? Give them a whole bunch of sheets to sign, asking questions. But I mean, you have your own style of connecting with your client. And we like to share some of that. And it is here and now, we're going to do the best we can. And this is why personality is so important. Why? You have to understand your style will match with the style of your client. And that makes it so much easier. But then you cannot always get clients, with the same. But you are a mature, trained, experienced professional. You know how to reach people cannot be reached. Am I asking a lot? It is hard, but you do. You see some people walk in very grumpy and say, yeah, that's one more thing again, especially when the court order, they must get counseling. Fix me, nobody else have done it. So, I mean, they come in right there. How do you how do you play that? You should be the experienced person with CAS. Right? You've seen those tough guys, didn't you?
Well, I think it's just my style would be more of I use a sense of humor depending on the client at first. So I mean, I try to go in when I work with clients that are difficult. I go in kind of more passive in terms of I don't go in because it's a confrontational issue anyways.
Exactly.
So especially if I'm going to somebody's home, even though I have the authority, I'm going there and say you need to do this, 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 and this. I go in there and kind of make small talk with them, kind of, develop a rapport with them, and then I kind of get them to do certain things. But once they have a relationship with you established, they will do it.
Right.
But the most key thing that I always use is respect. I always go in there thinking, it's their home. I'm a person just like you are. I'm not better than you. That's my own mindset.
Yes.
I'm in a different position than you are. So
Yes.
it separates us.
Ex-
So that actually helps me to be able to help the clients because I'm not going there thinking, okay, I'm the authority. I know more than you, and I'm better than you. I don't do that. That doesn't work. So when I go in there thinking, okay, you're another human being like me. I need to show you respect.
Yes.
You deserve respect, but there's some issues that we have to work on. We'll just
Right.
work on those issues. And 9 out of 10 times, most families will buy into that kind of stuff.
If they are confrontational, you play the passive role.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. Any other?
So say we get a lot of clients of CAS or fax sends to us, and I say, okay, what are they after? Why are they sending you here? Explain what's going on, explain why you need counseling, and educate me or what.
Right. Share with me your experience. How can I help you? And I think this is very hard because especially teenagers, they don't have this mature idea of my life goal. Right? It's day-to-day coping. Enjoy life, right? I mean, they have the right to. So it is our job to reach to them and see what their strengths are, what the weaknesses are, what are the obstacles that are preventing them to fulfill their goals, right? Those are we are not just talking about solving problem with our emotion and everything else. We are psychoeducational, right? We understand where they're coming from. With our knowledge, we educate and help them, and we are assisting them, right? We're moving along with them, walking along with them. We need a lot of patience, don't we? And engage a client in a meaningful and therapeutic relationship. We're not just buddies, okay? You don't call me in the middle of night and say, I get upset, what you gonna do, right? You don't. And you have to be meaningful and you have to be very therapeutic, right? And that's the same. You don't call me at this time of the night, we will talk tomorrow. That is discipline, right? And they need to exercise boundary because you need to set the boundary, but you know whether they're how far the boundary they are ready to have. All right, essential self-disclosure. This is very important we talked about earlier, and also it is authentic. I'm not, like I share with you downstairs, right away you trigger some of the other people who say, I had the same experience too, right? And we could exchange on the basis of common understanding. And also, as you said, you humanize the relationship. I'm not here as a superior to that. There are too many of them already. I am here to recognize you are valuable human being. I respect you, and you have gifts that can be developed and used, not just for your own development, for your family's development, for your circles of friends, but also for society. So we are doing not just the person to rescue the person. Lots of people think that we are in the rescuing work. Yes, we are. We do rescue, but we are not like a fireman to call one shot. It is a continuous. So I think we need to be open, discreetly, and to be, most importantly, to be able to build trusting relationship. Once that trust is demolished, is destroyed, and you can't. Like the example that I showed, Paul doesn't trust his client anymore, right? Because the client is using excuses to get away from therapy, I think. Now, this is another thing you have to remember. You are doing so well step by step, but at some point the client wants to get out. Can you tell me the reason why they couldn't face They open so many doors for you, and you enter and you go into it and you fix it. All of a sudden, when you come here, the door's shut. Because there are areas of secrets that they could not face at this moment, right? So the same thing with us. That's why I said in the beginning, you have the right to keep secrets to yourself until you are ready to open. And we've got to respect the client of that too. They are not ready, don't push it. What would you say? Well, it looks like, everything else, what you wanted to, to talk about, we already covered. And here are some things that you mentioned, but you're not willing to go through. That's okay. When you are ready, we could talk about it. You see, so that is actively showing them you respect their rights. And I think that is very important. Especially sometimes, with correction services. They don't give them the right, they don't feel that they were in charge. Human beings need to feel that I am in charge of my life. And therapists have said, I empower you to strengthen your intention to be your own person. Because you were there just for a moment. You disappear. And they have to be on their own. And this is why I say this is so important in psychotherapy, so that you can help them to help themselves. It sounds like cliche, but this is the truth. Okay, because we talk about discovering ourselves, using ourselves for therapy, we cannot avoid vulnerability. When you talk to people that they could turn back and say, you don't tell me not to do, you did it too, right? It can be vulnerable. But you, of course, you know what to say, right? Yeah, it's nature to be anxious about personal failures and weaknesses. It's hard, isn't it? You know what my weakness is? Compulsivity. Waste too much time. Distractibility. Couldn't focus on the major because I don't want to face the major task. It's too difficult, too effortful. I got to do something that's light, I clean the kitchen, put things away, even though it's been there for 20 months. But I find reason to clean up, right? Because I avoid heavy-duty stuff. And so, a lot of times we could not face our own failures. So today we're going to give you an inventory of self. You don't have to share if you don't want to. You could write it down. You could keep it until you're ready to share, okay? And each therapist must accept and transcend your limitations and vulnerability. That's growth. We need to learn to grow. And also we heal ourselves so that we can help the clients to heal. Okay, now we talk about a lot about self-disclosure, but it is potential risk when you do self-disclosure. But by and large, you have more benefit for the clients if you're discreet. And so the most important thing is the last point here. Self-disclosure strengthens the therapeutic bond. That's what it should do. Self-disclosure humanizes the therapist and facilitates more human exchange. Now then, say, well, okay, what would I do with a 3-year-old, 7-year-old? What do I do with somebody who's older? But somehow you are equipped to do it. I had a 7-year-old girl, very precocious, from a family. Father is a high-tech guy. Mother is a social, not therapist, but not social worker, but in between, working with human resources. And a brother who's highly autistic. And so we just kind of, you can imagine the family dynamic and the needs and all that. It's heavy duty. One day after 3 sessions, She's a little wee 7-year-old. She came to my office, walked straight to where you sat in that couch. She lay down with the pillow. I know I cannot change my mom. And I also know that I cannot change my dad, but I can change myself.
Oh, insightful.
So don't think young children don't know how to understand or how to act. She feel free to come to my office. She wouldn't share with mom, she wouldn't share with dad, but she comes to me. It's amazing, right? So with those children, that's where you need to have new skills and to allow them. And don't underestimate their ability to absorb the essence and what you teach them. And they could be so creative. They use your word and they do different things. This is why I thought, everybody needs to have a centre. Because that's where they do their activity, creativity, or pictures. Children draw pictures and ask them, what is the story here? And they will reveal to them through pictures. And, okay, do a dance. I have a student who's in drama therapy. It's amazing how you could express yourself in action. And kids love that. Young people do now, and so it is so important. All right, we talk about that a little bit, hindering effect of self-disclosure. Violation of boundary. That's what Paul's client said. You violated the boundary all the time. Yes, you could have. And reversal. You started to, because it triggers your own needs, so you started to talk. It's not for the client when you were disclosing, because it's for your own needs. When you catch yourself doing that, it's so important. They say, I'm saying this not for the good of the client because I need to. Right away, you need to get somebody to talk with you. You get a counselor, you get a therapist, or you get groups, your peer supervision.
So, quick question.
Yes.
In terms of boundaries, setting boundaries with clients, sometimes some of my clients, I do have a lot of teenage clients that I work with, teenagers that I
Yes.
work with, and sometimes we do go for lunch together, and I find that's the way, for a teenager, that's the way of hooking them in, because sitting down to me talking across a desk doesn't work for them. So some of it I do take them out, maybe whether it's McDonald's, getting a coffee or maybe a salad or something like that, some food. I do that with them, and I think I find that you might not look at it as being appropriate. That's what I do with them, and we have dinner, and then I get more information from them than just sitting in the office having a discussion with them.
Well, Carl was saying, did he violate the boundary by taking the teenagers who have issues and they are his clients to McDonald's for lunch? How many people say yes, he violated the boundary? Did you feel that you violated the boundary of clients and therapists?
I didn't think that until when you brought up that.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Wong.
Because typically with my work with kids, sometimes that's appropriate, so I do that, and I think maybe because sometimes that's already established rapport with them, so it may not necessarily be valid because they've already established that we can go out for lunch.
You already have a very solid bonding,
Right.
and you felt that by taking them to lunch, you get more out of them, and you can share more with them.
Right.
Do you see any violation? I don't think so.
Okay.
Yes.
The problem is at the center I work for, we used to do that. Because of the insurance and malpractice insurance, we can't.
According to the insurance policy, you're not allowed?
Yeah,
So So maybe that is something you need to examine your policy in the
Well, actually,
agency.
'cause I have two insurance. One with work, like my professional job that I do at CS. It's allowed.
Okay.
Aha,
So-
you see, you have to look at the policy of your agency, okay? When would that be a violation of boundary?
Well, so the only
Yes,
red
Joe?
flag that I heard at all was to get more information out of them. That piece sounds like it's more, that piece is more for you. And I'm just curious, is that a small piece of the decision to go to McDonald's, or is it more just to build and connect on a deeper level for the client's well-being?
Well, it's not necessarily for my well-being, or I don't really get anything on it. I find that once I get more out of them, I find maybe I should rephrase it differently. In terms of reframing it more, when I take a client out to lunch, food sometimes brings people on the same mutual level.
Yes.
They speak more openly about things. So I find that when I take them out for lunch, they're able to share more, and I'm able to gather more clinical information about them and able to access services that they require.
Okay.
So the consequence of your action is a positive for the client
Right.
because you can share meals with them and they are more relaxed and share with you. Who paid for the lunch?
My agency pays for the lunch. The agency will pay for the lunch.
So you share your lunch money with your client.
The agency, so I don't pay.
Oh, the agencies,
Yes, I obviously pay it first, and then I'd be reimbursed.
they reimburse you. So in other words, your agency approve of the lunch.
Yeah.
And does the client know that if you're paying for it personally, or if you're reimbursed, does that come up at all? Or is it just not really discussed?
Not really. Like, I mean, sometimes they know that something I will put in for reimbursement. I would say that I put it in for reimbursement. They know.
That's a good question. Does your client know that you are not paying for the lunch and it was the agency? How would you handle that? Would you just go and say, we'll have lunch and now I pay, but I didn't pay it out of my own pocket? Yeah, that's kind of, that doesn't go very well, does it?
No, I don't necessarily always say that. Like, for example, like if I have a client that I've been working with, because my job will be scope of practice in terms of social work, be a little bit different from yours in terms of private practice. So I think some of it is probably it's more, it would be allowable in terms of for me to, will be allowed rather, than for me to take them out for lunch. And it may come up, it may not come up. I mean, I don't necessarily say with a big flag, okay, I'll be reimbursed for my lunch I take you out on, but I mean, for like somebody's birthday, if I have a report with the client for a long period of time, I have a client that I've been working with since he was 13. He's been turned 21. So we're closing his farm.
Yeah.
So I took him out actually to the keg, because I know he likes that, for his birthday and actually a goodbye dinner. So it was actually more than, he ate a lot. He did. So it was more than what the agency would cover.
Yeah.
So I paid for it anyways. I worked with this kid for a long time.
Yeah.
We have a really good relationship, professional relationship. That's scope of practice. That's why I paid for it.
I think in situations like this,
Right.
you got to think about the ethical issues.
Right.
You got to do it the right way.
Right.
Because you say, oh, I didn't pay for that, and that cuts the joy and the relationship.
Right, yeah.
It doesn't, they don't care whether you pay for it or the agency pay for it, right? Most of children don't.
No.
And the only thing is, are there situations that it is not good? For example, if you have an attractive lady as a client, you want to take her out for lunch. Now that is vulnerable,
No.
right?
Yeah, I wouldn't. If
Right?
Doesn't have to be a lady nowadays.
Right, you're right.
But for me, when I take a client out, I don't take a client out the first time. Never. It would have to be under certain circumstances. Like I'm just picking a client up, moving him from a home, and they haven't eaten dinner. I make it into a McDonald's because they're hungry.
Yes.
So I probably will do that. But if I meet a client for the first time, it takes generally a number of sessions before I'm comfortable with going with them with them in public by myself for a dinner. I wouldn't do that on the onset. No.
You see, you have something to say?
I was just also thinking it also could depend on which model the program is based. Like I once worked in a program that was based on the psychosocial rehabilitative model. And in that model, we were allowed to take the students or clients out for a coffee. And we could also pay for their bus fare on occasion if we had to take them to a doctor's appointment.
These unusual happenings, you've got to be very clear the policies of your agency and think about the benefit of the client and ethical issues. What might happen down the road? Am I just being too
Too nice?
no, I mean, too suspicious or too much, thinking too much? No, because we're dealing with human beings. They could misinterpret anything that we do, depending on their mental set.
Right.
On their mindset, we don't understand, right? We could only take a peek of what it is at that particular moment. This is why I emphasize here and now, and then give them tools that they could move forward. And of course, you know, when self-disclosure could be burdensome for the client. And as I mentioned, you know, yesterday, you know, the supervisor completely dumped everything onto the supervisee, and the same thing as the counselor dumps everything on the client. So this is why we had to be careful. And feeling uncomfortable about the level of intimacy, yeah, sometimes, you know, like, when we share too much, your client is not, you know, like some clients are huggable, you know, loving and all warm from environment, and they would find that it was okay. But then some people say, oh, why would you tell me that, you know? Yeah. So you got to watch the body language, and you got to understand where the clients are coming from. But facilitating effect of self-disclosure, and we talk about building rapport very quickly, because, you know, it's you know what I'm talking about. Whoa, you know, like we have, and more on the same level, you know, kind of relationship, and resonate with the needs, and so they kind of indicate, and that you understand them. Okay, yes, you do. You know, as you said, you've been with the client for from how many years, and you get a deeper connection. And so you encourage the client to take risk to disclose to you. So perfect timing. My husband needs to go, and I'm going to assist him. And in the meantime, I'm going to give you have a copy of you just sit there and as a therapist and just ask questions, and just like opening for him, okay? It's just like, okay, you just don't respond and you look at her. You just keep looking at her.
We're feeling for you.
No, you just smile.
Okay.
Just smile, just look at her.
So he's got a smile and I have to go?
And you keep on carry on, because you are the therapist, and you have a client, and the client comes to you, okay, and you just ask him questions and trying to get started on therapy. And he just look at you. He does not respond whatsoever. Okay, now you could create any scenario that you think previously what his problem may be or anything else. You just get him engaged in counseling.
I'll stay.
Okay, so hi Denise. Thank you so much for coming. So can you tell me what brought you out today? Because we met already before, yes? So that was my
this is
name.
maybe the third session, second or third session.
Okay,
So then we're gonna talk what happened like during the session?
Yeah, you could talk about, how are things going and what was it you're dealing with, just create
I
any.
don't like this camera, sorry, because I'm just confused what to do.
Yeah, I know,
Yeah.
it's okay.
No, but
I'll tell you the whole
I
situation.
want, maybe she's confused because she doesn't know what the purpose of the interchange is?
I don't know how much I'm supposed to not.
Yeah,
Respond
like,
back.
what's the scenario?
Okay.
What's the scenario?
Okay, I just want her to feel what was it like when the client does not respond whatsoever.
Okay, I don't think she knew that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what would you do when the
This
client
isn't
does not,
difficult.
all he does is to look at you, up and down, and just look at you.
Pretend I'm high.
What I want to do, I will just give like more time, and I will say, if you're not ready, we can talk another time, or maybe I can drink you like a cup of tea or a glass of water. Because if he's not responding for a while, then what? I have to ask, like, what stops you? What stops you of not talking to me? What happened? Can you describe? And he still just looking at me without a response. So, is anything that I can help you with? Can I bring you something? I will say kind of. No.
Okay, so how do you feel? When a-
Awkward.
Very awkward.
What's going through my mind is one of my clients who was on methadone or something like that. It took him 20 minutes to answer a question. He asked what his name was, and it took him about 10 minutes to figure out what his name was.
Yeah.
So my question, like I said, am I high? Is that why I'm not responding?
Yeah, you don't have any reason, you don't believe that he would come in here all the way and come for the session and not saying anything.
Yeah, I will expect him to say something because people coming with problems. So like if it's like 15 minutes and you have like no response, so you kind of like wondering why.
Isn't it frustrating?
Sorry?
That is very frustrating, right?
It's frustrating, very frustrating, yeah. But you know, like I mean,
How
I
would you end the session?
You could just sit there for
so I will just ask, what would you like to take from the session? What would you like to take from today's session? Should we just sit and, you know, if you're comfortable, we can sit, we don't have to talk. If this is okay with you. And if you're ready, you can just say something. I've never been in this situation.
So now you're prepared.
Agnieszka, you should go get yourself a cup of tea.
Yeah, sounds like you're really struggling. I'm gonna
go get myself a cup of tea. Do you want one?
you
Right.
seem really uncertain which direction to go.
You know what? It is not about this. I think I will know what to do in the place.
Yes.
I think I feel awkward because
Sure.
you.
Yeah.
You know, like that's that part. But I will bring for sure a blanket, a tea, anything, and I don't know. Like my clients, they are talking a lot, honestly. So, well, I think I'm even comfortable with the silence. But after like 10 minutes, you are wondering because something is like different. And I don't know if you agree with me, Lily, but if you have clients like will not tell anything, you will ask the question, wondering, are you okay? So can I just sit with you? I'm okay, you know, be silent and sitting with you. If this is okay with you, just let me know when you are ready, or just show me a guest, just show you know, the sign. And if you like me to talk, just show me. I can talk.
That's good.
Yeah.
Sounds good?
Yeah.
Well, thank you very, very much. Thank you very much.
Thank